mentioned you guys also invest in developing countries. Can you elaborate on that? What asset classes?
So the Developing World Mutual Fund, we started in, I think, like 2009, and because, our two income and growth fund, we wanted to offset that, right? So when you think about having a balanced portfolio, you want to have some kind of exposure to international, right? So 10%, 20%, it depends. And so that's why we created the Developing World Mutual Fund. And so we're not just looking for companies that are based in the developing world, we're also looking for companies who invest in the developing world. So if like 40% of their revenue are coming from the developing world, then that would be another kind of company that we will put in our portfolio. And so we have some brochures at both ends of these tables. And when you look at that brochure, we have a section on each mutual fund. And so you get to see the top 10 holdings in the Modern Developing World Fund. So you can kind of see some of the companies that we're investing in the developing world.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and as I was mentioning, I'm contemplating retiring soon. And you had mentioned something about how you provide assistance in calculating the portion that goes to Zakat based on my withdrawal. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, Zakat is a broad subject, and one of the things that we do as a service for our investors is that we calculate the Zakat for your investment account, and we'll send you a Zakat statement. We try to get it out January, February time period, and that would allow you can use our calculation, or you can just use that information to use it for your own calculation, because different people follow different fiqh principles on Zakat. So we do that on a yearly basis. And just a bit about our Zakat calculation. So we're not looking on your balance, we're looking on the profit that you made on your balance. So instead of paying 2.5% of the total, you have to pay 10% of any profit that you made. And so we'll calculate, say, January 2024, you had 10,000. December 2024, you had 20,000. So you made $10,000 that year. And so your Zakat on that would be $1,000, so on and so forth, versus doing, 2.5% of 30. No problem.
So I'm fairly new to investing, so I kind of have a question that's two-in-one. So to what extent do you look at for mutual funds and ETFs, because it's a collection of all these different companies? Sometimes I see that some of the companies become non-Sharia compliant, and so especially with what's going on right now with like Israel and Gaza, sometimes some of those companies that are in the mutual funds might be companies that support Israel. So how, is that something that's being considered whenever the mutual funds are formed? And then I guess the latter question I have, so if we're investing in the long term and then we have some of these non-Sharia compliant companies, how do we actually purify? I know we want to keep it there. We want to say, not open the door of the plane. But how do we, once we, reach the age, okay, we want to take it out, how do we purify that?
So that's a great question. So one is that even in our Sharia guidelines, you have 5% of your income that can be classified as impermissible, right? And so what our scholar says is that the expense ratio that every mutual fund and ETF has purifies it from the impermissible income, right? So the impermissible income is purified through the ETF. Our website has a calculation where you can further purify your mutual fund investment from the income. And so the other question is, our community is really important to us, and we understand that, I think it's almost 50% of our shareholders are people of other faiths, and 50% in the Muslim community, even though our niche is investing along with Muslim values. And so the things like who are supporting these countries that are at war are really important for us. But one of the decisions they made early on is not to invest in weapons manufacturers.
So they don't invest in weapons manufacturers across the board. People are making, machines that are going to kill mass individuals. So that kind of helps. But even during this current situation, we've received calls about looking at this company, so on and so forth, and there's a lot of lists out there. And we do our research, and we take it seriously. And so if someone says something, we do our due diligence. We kind of meet with the investor relations. We kind of ask questions to kind of understand. So if it's a military, if they're making things to sell to military, then that's just something we don't invest in. However, sometimes you see where something will be made and there'll be dual usage, right? Or you'll see if it's a global company, if they're going to be a global company, they're going to be in business in Israel, right? But when you think about it, the population of Israel is 10 million people. So, how much Coca-Cola is Coca-Cola really selling in Israel versus everywhere else in the world? So we think about that. But to your other point is that when a company becomes not Sharia compliant, then we're not going to invest in it. So if you're investing in our mutual fund, once, for example, take Pepsi Cola. Pepsi Cola, they make second-rate cola drinks, which is fine. No offense if you like Diet Pepsi. But they started selling a hard Mountain Dew. So that means a Mountain Dew with liquor. And so when they announced that, we said, okay, well, by the time they have that, we're going to take that out of our portfolio, right? And so there's been other companies who have started into an area of business that's not aligned with our faith. Think Bed Bath & Beyond. And so bed, that's fine. Bath, that's fine. But what's this beyond, right? And so the beyond, once they started selling alcohol, and they were a retail company, so we did invest it. One of my favorite stories is that the founder, he told me that one of the investments in 1986, and you all might be a little too young, but there was this company called Blockbusters. Y'all like, what's Blockbusters? You don't remember Blockbusters. And so there was Blockbusters. And so a person from the community came up to one of our founders and said, hey, Blockbuster sells R-rated movies. And so they were like, oh, I never thought of that. So they were like, okay. They called Blockbusters up and say, how much income do you make from R-rated movies? They were like, huh? Like, I don't know. And so they were like, okay, well, we're going to divest of Blockbusters. And that was before Netflix. So, Netflix and Redbox made it a very smart decision. So those are like two examples. So, our mutual fund is always going to do that for you. First, yeah, we're constantly being reviewed. So.
Could you reiterate the part where you said about the purification? So within the 5%, that already considers purifying it all?
So the 5% of the income can come from an impermissible source, right? So usually what we do as a company, we don't want to really be on the borderline of our rules, because then that way we might have to sell, right, when we don't want to. And so the difference between a mutual fund, an actively managed mutual fund, and an ETF, ETFs are usually not making those decisions on themselves. They're basically writing an algorithm, and if a company goes and buys a company and their leverage goes up, their debt goes up, it'll sell them. And when the company gets their debt back down, they'll buy them again. We're able, because we're making decisions, like when we look at total debt, we say, what is the 12-month market cap? So it gives them a range of a time to sell it. And so when we look at that 5%, we're not buying companies that are 4.5. We're buying companies that are 1 and 2, because if they get to 3, okay, that's fine. But if they get a 4.5 and 5, then we'll eventually have to sell them. So, one of the things in investment management is that the government makes sure that you want to do what you say you're going to do. So if you're going to say you're Sharia compliant, but you don't have Sharia rules you use, even the government, FINRA, the other regulators will kind of come after you. So for the part of the income that's impermissible, right, that there's a expense ratio for each fund. So that expense ratio goes back to the mutual fund for managing, for doing the accounting. And so that purifies it for that fund. That's one purification. Our community, some people want an extra step, And so we have an extra step on our website where you can further purify. So you go to our website, you put in how many shares, and they'll tell you how much money you have to purify if you choose to. So, no problem.
I have 2 questions. So
You only get one.
well, many of us are community organizers, like IMSA already started investing with Amana Farm.
Alhamdulillah.
I would like to also a little bit give explanations to the audience if the organization they involved in want to also do some investment. Second thing is we want a win-win, right, between IMSA and all of you about the stock donation to charity.
Definitely, definitely. So those 2 great questions. I would have paid you to ask me those questions. So when we think about accounts for nonprofit institutions, one of the big things is fundraising. And so one of the ways to really help your high net worth donors is by offering them the ways to donate money, but also save in taxes. So if you have a high net worth individual, they're always going to have tax problems, right? And so if they donated appreciated stocks, so when I sell a stock that I make money on, I have to pay taxes on it. I pay capital gains tax. But if I donate it to a 501c3, because they're a 501c3, I get the full write-off value of it. And then when the 501c3 sells it, they won't have to pay any taxes on it. So that's one. Number 2 is that when you have a retirement account and you have a 401k or individual retirement account, that's a traditional. So that means that you put in money before tax. You didn't pay taxes on it, right? And so the government is going to mandate that you take it out at 70 and a half. It's called a required minimum distribution. And so, subhanAllah, alhamdulillah, there's some people who are required to take money out of their IRA who don't even need it, right? And they don't want to take it out because the reason the government wants you to take it out is so they can tax it. And so you can donate your required minimum distribution over to a 501c3 instead of taking it in and having to pay taxes on it, and then you get a write-off. And so those are kind of the advantages of having an investment in a brokerage account for a 501c3. And so how it works is that you have to have a brokerage account to be able to receive stock donations. So if you have a high net worth individual who wants to give you some Tesla stock, Tesla has they have their new kind of headquarters here in Austin. You have to have a brokerage account set up to receive that. And so one of the things we do, we worked with IMSA, we make it 100% online, that you send it to us, we collect some information, and then we send it to you from DocuSign to be able to open those accounts. They count, if you don't use it for a whole year, there's a $25 admin fee for the whole year if you don't use it. And then if you use it, it's only $15 per trade. So if you get in a donation and you sell it, it's just a one flat time $15. So those are the, and then the investment account. So usually what, we encourage nonprofits, or we kind of advise them that other nonprofits do, is that if you're taking in a donation, say you're taking in, $50,000 of Tesla stock. So instead of just putting that in your bank account, you bring that in, you sell the Tesla shares, because unless you're going to watch it on a daily, weekly basis, you might not want to own individual stocks. And then you can buy our mutual funds. You can buy the Amana Income Fund, the Amana Growth Fund, so on and so forth. So your organization can kind of invest in their future, and then they can take those funds out at any time. So that's one of the things that we work with. We do presentations on Islamic investing, presentations for Muslim women on Islamic investing. We actually just hired a new regional manager in New Jersey, and it's a Muslim sister. And so, there's a couple of conferences that I can't go to. There's like Empowered Women Conference in Minnesota. It's women only. I said, but I'm talking about Empower Women with Rich. They were like, you still can't come. And so now we have a member of our team. Her name is Samar Tariq. She's actually has over 10 years of investment management experience. So she's on our team. So we're really trying to make sure that information about this, and one of the reasons is that, when you look at those charts and you say, hey, if I started at 25, I can have 1.3. I'm sitting at 45 and like, oh man, right? And so it's really important that this knowledge is getting down to our youth. And so we're also doing youth workshops. I did a youth workshop in Atlanta during Thanksgiving time with just, high school, college students. Because one of the things when you think about this, in any topic, you need to hear something 3 to 5 times before you really understand it. So like a Roth IRA is traditional, so the first time you hear about it, if that's at 16, by the time you're 20, you're going to feel comfortable understanding the difference. And so for people who say, hey, I'm new to investment, it's actually even more important to kind of get started, to kind of get your feet wet. And I tell people the best way to get started by learning about investments is just to invest, right? Our accounts you can open with $100. And it's, if you go out, like $100 is relatively low. Like usually it's $250, $500. That we're very intentional about making it $100 because we want to lower the kind of barriers to kind of investing. So, any more questions?
I sometimes go to the mosque and there's a pretty conservative opinion that says, I want to invest in businesses that have like absolutely no debt, no liability at all. So what's kind of the quick response to that?
That, when we first started our mutual fund, we were working with the scholars. They were like, okay, give us companies that have no debt. Then we brought the companies that had no debt. It was 2 banks. So we're like, oh, you can't invest in that. They use interest. And so we said, okay, look at the companies that have no banks and no this and no that. And we realized like one company, so on and so forth. And, understanding that, when I was at NCF, it's the school in Malaysia, our Sharia professor was like saying that the scholars have to make a way for people to live their life, right? And so they have to make room within the sacred law for people to live their life. So when you think about even that 5% rule, like 5% impermissible income, a lot of people are like, no, if it's any impermissible income, it's haram. And usually it's like 20-year-olds who are saying this. It's like, okay, wait till you get a little older and life gets a little bit more complicated. But it's the same thing about like a body of water. If you go to a lake and there's a bit of najasa in that lake, it's not going to make the whole lake impermissible. So the scholars are using their wisdom, they're using analogies to kind of create room to give leeway, but also making sure that the important things, we're not buying Boeing, we're not buying Anheuser-Busch, so on and so forth. And so, even, I go to masjids and some people say the imam says the whole stock market is haram because it's gambling. And it's like, what's the imam's background? Well, he knows nothing about finance. And it's like, you can gamble on if you go to a new restaurant, right? Like I went to a restaurant the other day and I was like, I thought it was going to be good. And it was terrible. And I was like, I wish I could have my money back. I lost it. Like I didn't even finish it. And so the idea about speculation, right? We're not just buying a company, right? So the difference between us and other people in the market, we're doing a lot of research and we're investing in a company. Anytime you invest in a company, you're not sure if it's going to go up or down. So hoping that helps. Right here, and then we'll come back. No, and the nice cardigan.
Right, okay. Can you repeat again that your evaluation, you do it annually?
The evaluation? Yes. So they review us on a quarterly basis. So review our portfolio on a quarterly basis. And then on an annual basis, they're giving like a Sharia certificate that we put on our website.
What was for the super product? You made a comparison for the rate of return to like the super, I think the super index.
Mm-hmm.
Also has equity in super.
Yeah.
How does it compare to like not a super product, but like a bond product? How would you call that?
Yeah, so one of the things that you're looking at is when you look at bonds versus bond funds, right? And so when you look at bonds with inflation going up, interest rates have really gone up recently, right? So you can see bonds that are paying 5%. You see CDs that are paying 5%. So when you have a fund, you have to wait for those bonds to be issued right, at lower rates before you buy the ones at higher rates, so on and so forth. So a bond fund is usually going to have a lag in to be very competitive. And it works the other way around. If we have bonds that are paying, 5% and, they are 2 years from maturity, and the new ones, because of whatever, are being offered at 1 or 2%, that our fund is going to look very well until they're kind of a catch up. And so that's why our Sukuk fund is, you can see it's a little lower than the FTSE Sukuk index, along with, last year's kind of trouble in the market as well.
On your website, do you have a explanation how, I heard how you calculate your zakat based on profits and all that.
Yeah.
Do you have it on your website?
We have a brochure. Like if you send me an email, if you fill out, I can send you the zakat brochure.
Because I've been doing a rough calculation online based on zakat before, so I think it's similar to that, but I would like to see.
Yeah, definitely. We can do that.
Yeah, can you expand a bit on the backdoor Roth IRA, and would you suggest IRA to Roth IRA?
So if you have a traditional IRA and or if you have a traditional 401k and you want to move it over to a Roth 401k, it's fine, but you have to take all that income that year, right? So most people don't want to do it because if you have a $200,000 in your 401k, you roll it over to a Roth IRA, you have to take all that as income. So usually what people do is they take their 401k and roll it over to a traditional IRA, right? And you don't have any tax impacts. And so the backdoor Roth is that folks who make above 220, high wage earners, can't get the benefits of a Roth IRA. They can do a traditional IRA, but you won't get a tax deduction from your traditional IRA if you already have a 401k. So what you can do is you can put money in a traditional IRA, you won't get a tax deduction, but after 10 days, you can convert that over to a Roth IRA. And because you never got a tax deduction for it, it was already after tax money, then you don't have to, pay any taxes on it because, there's another kind of IRS form that you fill out and say, hey, I didn't get a tax deduction when I put this money into my traditional IRA. And so when you convert it, it's not another tax thing. You just got to keep records of it, so on and so forth. So the backdoor Roth is allowing high wage earners to also get the benefit of a Roth IRA. And so you can kind of grow this wealth bucket that in retirement you won't have to pay any taxes on it. And it kind of helps you in retirement because if you want to stay within a certain tax bracket, you could say, hey, I'm going to take $40,000 out of my traditional IRA, and I also want to do something else, so I'm going to take $20,000 out of my Roth IRA.
One more time. I know my husband was talking about you want to retire soon, but this is my question to my husband. He planning to pay off the house, and then we were meeting some finance advisor, and we mentioned about it, and he said, why is it you want to pay off your house? Just leave it as it is, And I told him that, no, I don't want to leave that. I said, I want to finish my house and we live, with the retirement. So what do you think about that? Because he kind of giving me why you want to pay off your house, just leave it as it is and keep going with your, transfer your money.
Yeah, so there's a financial aspect, right, and then there's an emotional reason, right? So the financial reason is you look at your investments and what you can earn for your investments versus what you're paying in, even if it's financing, if it's Sharia compliant or conventional, you think about what you're paying in financing versus what you can earn by investing $1, right? That's the financial kind of calculation. The kind of emotional behavioral calculation is, does it make me feel in a better state to know that I had this kind of home paid off? My mother-in-law, may Allah have mercy on her, she got laid off from her job. And so she took money out of her 401k to pay off her house. And I said, Mama, no, we don't do that. And she said, I was laid off. I was feeling the stress of having this house payment and not having income coming in. So she paid it off. And, we actually found out that she was also battling breast cancer. And so she eventually passed away from breast cancer, but it was just not having, and then once she told me why, I said, look, I don't want you to be stressed. So that's much more important than just this financial calculation. And so when you're working with financial advisors, they have to understand both the behavioral side and not just the financial side. Because the financial side is easy, like, hey, this dollar I'm paying, I have a 3%, and usually your home financing is going to be like the lower kind of percents that people have, versus when you're investing, you can kind of make more for that dollar than you're saving, paying off a house. But you have to also think behaviorally, what makes you feel more secure? So these are all very good questions.
Yeah, in terms of your explanation about Sukuk before, I'm really into it, but one thing that bothers me, I just checked on the stock application, and there is a huge drop in the last month. And then would you like to tell us what's going on and how did you guys handle and recover it? Thanks.
What do you mean, in the last month, in the Sukuk market or in the?
Participation fund, there is a huge drop, and then it's increased again.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, there's a couple of things. Like, one is when dividends are paid, the fund amount is going to drop, right? So I'm not sure. When dividend pays, the funds amount are going to drop. So it could be around the dividend, when the dividend got announced. But we could talk about it offline, or even I could put you in touch with our portfolio managers who kind of manage the Sukuk fund, and they give more detailed information about performance, some of the background about the performance, why it's high and why it's not. So we got time for one more, or that's one more? Definitely, that's it. So the question was, how do you balance between short and long term? I think one of the first things is you want to make sure that you have savings, like you have that rainy day fund, right? I don't want to invest someone's last $1,000 because, the market might go down and they need it, and then they're like, oh, HUD, I hate you so much. And so you want to make sure that you have cash for your rainy day fund. But when you think about investment, I think the Roth IRA gives you that flexibility. Like, if you think you putting money into a Roth, you can have it for long term, but after 5 years, you can use it to pay for a house, or you can use it to pay for education. Or say you put money into a Roth and there's a family medical emergency. So you don't have to take out the profit. You can just take out your contributions and kind of do, because we're all saving for the long term, but life happens, right? And so without getting through the short term, you're never going to be there for the long term. So the Roth IRA is that kind of account that gives you this kind of flexibility to kind of have both of them. In addition to that, you'll also have just a traditional investment account that gives you complete flexibility. It's taxable, but you only have to pay taxes on any of the gains. So you don't have to pay taxes. Like, if you put in $1,000 and then you have to take out $1,200, you only pay taxes on that $200. So definitely, alhamdulillah, hey, I have a booth upstairs. I've been very lonely. Nobody's been coming by the booth. So, send people to the booth. We're definitely really invested in trying to help this community. And look, an important thing is it's important to encourage saving and investing. Alhamdulillah, we have competition out here, but we want to grow the pie. So if people invest, I'm not going to say their names, I'm not going to give them that benefit. But if people invest with other ones, it's a good thing, because the more that we're investing in this kind of Islamic economy, the more we're going to have other products, And I know that because I lived in Malaysia, and my son, he was like 4 months old, and he had like a cyst on his head, and he had to go to a doctor. We went to the primary care down the hall, and we were in Mont Kiara in KL. And they were like, oh, he needs to go to hospital. And I was like, I'm in a foreign country going to the hospital with my 4-month-old. I was really, and then my wife had to stay there, and then we had a 2-year-old, so I couldn't just all stay there. So it was really, but we were able to get Takaful insurance to kind of cover us for the rest of the time we were there, and that's because they have a developed economy here. And so if we want things here, we have to make sure that we kind of invest in this economy. So Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Thank you all, and I'll be here inshallah. Thank you. No problem, thank you. So you already have an account with us?
No, I don't. I have,
Account fidelity.
in Vanguard, so, I have most of my stuff there, so.
Okay. Do you invest with us through Vanguard?
No, that's all, I have to check.
Here, make sure you have this.
I'm gonna make sure I calculate. Because, sometimes I feel like, because my husband's been, you Anna, it's all, you were,
I'm in Richardson. I moved to Richardson 2 years ago.
I'm from Malaysia.
Okay.
I love my
Okay. You get a pension?
Can I borrow this?
Oh, of course. You want a frisbee? How you going, Chief? Okay.
Because I haven't really checked it recently. That's Class C.
No.
Section class.
Oh yeah, those are not our Sharia compliant funds. Yeah, yeah. So Saturn Capital has like 16 funds, but only those 4 are the Sharia compliant ones.
So I'm the
Saturn Capital is under Amana, right? Or is that?
Amana Mutual Fund is a trust, and they hire Saturn Capital to do all the fund administration. Okay. But definitely give me a call. Okay. You have a card? Yeah, definitely.
So I'm currently the president of the organization IMAM.
I am
IMAM.
Imam. Yeah, I know Imam.
Yeah, okay. So that's why we are interested to.
You want to write on that? Okay, just wait. Okay. All right, we'll just go right here. Yeah, I know Imam. Technically not their regional manager for Virginia, but because I work in Adams, I have so many connections that I tell people, I was like, I'm taking Virginia.
You can write it on.